very much. I'd like to welcome you, Minister, and I'd also like to commend Senator Swanwick for this commission and for this report. And I found it incredibly interesting reading, and I know you, in your introduction, you paid tribute to Joe Cox, of course, an MP who was notable for talking about that there's more that unites us and we have more in common than what divides us, and who really was one of the first to originate the idea of a commission on loneliness. I really commend you for taking that up. And I note again, it was somebody who was very sadly lost to violence, and that we do have Paweł Adamowicz, who was the mayor of Gdansk, who similarly, interestingly, had been somebody who had been praised for innovative forms of civic participation, and who was one of those people trying to drive the connections between people. And I think it's important that despite their tragic loss, that we maintain that spirit of connection that they were championing. I think loneliness takes many different forms. We've had people have spoken rightly about the issues of isolation, physical isolation, rural isolation, but also what comes across is that loneliness and isolation can take the forms in terms of, for example, one of the groups, a group who I've written reports on myself, and I feel strongly about, those parenting alone. Those who are caring. So people, when you are, for example, you can be lonely when you're not in a situation to maybe talk to another adult in the same way, in the day-to-day, or where you're not in a position, maybe if you are caring for somebody, and of course there's many wonderful relationships between carers and those they care for, but if you are in a situation where that's not, where you are in a situation where you cannot maybe express yourself to somebody you care for, to be able to reach out. And there is also that form of loneliness which becomes a kind of almost, not just a kind of a feeling of alienation from society, but a feeling of alienation from yourself. And I know that we see that, for example, sometimes for those who are LGBT, who are recognised as a community, when it can be very hard to feel that you can express yourself and be, even if you are in a situation that you're not able to be truly there yourself, it can feel very lonely despite connections. And I know that that is also something which some people in residential care talk about, because sometimes, unfortunately, when we have residential care settings, they don't always recognise the individuality of the people and the personality of the people, and that can be lonely despite, the many people you may live with. I really commend this report for, I think, getting some of that nuance of those different experiences, and also speaking, of course, to the experiences of new migrants to a country, and how, when you don't have maybe the inherited family networks and other networks, that it can be difficult to forge the casual day-to-day contacts. I want to kind of talk to one big picture piece that I feel maybe needs to be given a little bit more thought here, and then a couple of specific groups. So, in order to address it, to really follow up, to be honest about engaging with the issue of loneliness and isolation, we do need to look at the flip side, which is community building, and which is the work of building our social and community fabric. And it is an unfortunate reality, and this is, again, I don't say this to score points, I say this so that we can move forward. But during the period of recession, we had over 180 of our community development projects who either amalgamated or closed, and we did have as well a very strong focus within, and I worked at that time in civil society, so I saw it within community development projects, where the focus became so emphatically on training and on employment that actually the work of building that social fabric fell a little bit by the wayside, and that there wasn't as much space for, say, the youth groups, for the anti-racism or intercultural work, for the work with older people, for the work that was not necessarily about getting each individual back on track and into employment, but about building the connections between people. And I think that's something, I know that SICAP 2, as I understand it, is trying to slightly redress that balance again, but I'd encourage you, Minister, and I think all of us, to engage around how our community development can really work to deliver connections and engagement with people. And I think that's something, it does need resources, but it also needs giving the flexibility. And within that there may need to be, for example, I would absolutely support the call for a budget in respect of these loneliness initiatives, but there may also need to be a funding line a little bit outside service delivery frame for community development, but doing something that community development used to do very well and can at its best do very well, which is giving people the space to actually come up with their own ideas and to set the agenda. So it flips from individual recipients of services to a kind of empowering thing where people are almost creating the agenda and creating the ideas. And in that spirit, I want to endorse very much the recommendation about adequate community meeting space. I think that's something that's vitally important, and I know that in many areas that is something that's missing, and you have tensions of people trying to find where can we meet. If you have a space, if you have a space that's open, people will fill it with their ideas, and not every idea will succeed, and some ideas might be, you know, something people try for a few weeks, it doesn't catch on, but it is that idea of a space where you can, with a low outlay, with low bureaucracy, come up and bring ideas and try out a new group or try out a new idea. I think that's important. And building on that sense of public and community meeting spaces, libraries, I think, have been spoken about as well. But I would also say there's also the outdoor public spaces are really important. And inclusive outdoor public spaces. And that's something which I think other countries in Europe actually have done maybe a little bit better than Ireland sometimes, is creating a space where you can just turn up and be there and be in the life of a town and watch families of different ages and, you know, and be in a natural way with others. And like, you know, I know that we have in many other countries, I think there's a lot we can learn from ideas of how you create it, be it the public chessboards, be it the, you know, whatever things that give people that. And within that, green space is important as well. I was very sorry to see the public allotments in Dublin 8 at the closing down recently in terms of Weaver Square. And I know that there's huge imperative for social housing. I would have liked to see that in the Player Wills factory, as many others would, rather than in the closing down of a space which was an allotment and a wonderful thing for people to be able to go and be beside each other in a kind of very creative way. So again, I would urge that that idea of allotments of green spaces is something that we can nurture. And the child-friendly spaces, again, when we talked about lone parents and those parenting alone, spaces where you can bring a child, or places where people with a disability can both go themselves and maybe come with carers, and be where it's okay to be lots of different ways. You know what I mean, in a space like that. Because I think sometimes we don't have enough child-adult friendly, mutually friendly spaces in that regard. I wanted to just point to two last points here. Thank you very much. In terms of recommendations, one group I do want to focus on, lastly, I didn't pick it, well, I want to, first of all, because my colleague will, I am a member of the Dementia Working Group in the Oireachtas, and my colleague Senator Kelleher has pointed out, and it is recognised in the report, those with dementia living alone who are not having people that they can share their concerns with, can face a very particular deep sense of loneliness and of loss. And I think we know that the Holt-Lunstead research, as I think Senator Swanwick has pointed out, we know that that loneliness can lead to depression, to heart disease, have an impact of smoking and alcohol. Okay, my final point here. I used to work with Older and Bolder. I worked with age organisations across Ireland. We need to deliver the National Positive Ageing Strategy. It's there, it's a brilliant template, but it needs to roll out a lot faster. I'd like to see you, Minister, see it through to its full expression. I want to commend Alone, Active Retirement, Age Action, and all of those groups who do that work, that they need support. And I want to point out one in particular. Age and Opportunity have a brilliant scheme called Cultural Companions, whereby people who want to go to arts events or creative events can sign up and go with strangers and go with others. It's Cultural Companions is what it is, and it's a wonderful thing that says you don't have to have a family member or friend who's interested to attend a cultural event. And I know that there was a wonderful initiative in other countries where doctors could prescribe cultural activities and books. In some countries they've tried out this idea of a voucher to attend a cultural event, that you literally get prescribed that. And I think sometimes that's something that people need. So thank you very much. I know that I'm over time. It's an area in which I really hope we continue to discuss. I have huge interest in it. And again, that art spaces, and of course, lastly, respite care for space for carers is vital, so that they build up their resources and connections. And they are woefully low at the moment. Okay. I think everybody realises that, and that's something we could fix right now.